Welcome into the Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things WNBA, college hoops, maybe a little smattering of college football, perhaps, and much, much more. Mia O'Brien, SB Nation's Mitchell Northam. You know what it is. Do not wake me up when September ends, Mitch Northam, because September has just begun. We're recording this podcast on Monday, September 1st. And not only do we have college and NFL action this week, the WNBA playoffs are right around the corner. The race for the postseason has begun, and we're excited to break down all of the playoff scenarios, who's in, who's out, who's already been eliminated, and much, much more. But how are you on this fine Labor Day as we record this week's show?
I'm good. I feel like I've done a lot of dad stuff this weekend. I put up wallpaper. I changed a headlight. Went to Home Depot. So really getting into my dad mode here in preparation for mid-October. But yeah, college football is back, which means that the WNBA playoffs and the start of women's college basketball season just around the corner. So we're getting into my favorite time of year, which means the temperatures are dropping, which is also good because I'm here for that.
We are very much in our wheelhouse. And speaking of that crossover, that's where this week's Her of the Week maybe comes from, question mark. Quite frankly, because we've given this award now in the last month and a half to A'ja Wilson and Alyssa Thomas, two MVP frontrunners, not named Fee. I don't know how we want to classify it at this point. We actually had a wonderful discussion on ESPN Radio last Friday night about it too. I'm getting everybody from all the different sports walks of life, Mitch, to debate what is an MVP? Are we just fatigued when it comes to A'ja Wilson like we once upon a time were with Tom Brady? We are with LeBron James, but I digress. No A'ja, no Alyssa Thomas. We're going to give it to Alyssa Thomas's teammate, Rutgers Scarlet Knights alum, Aaliyah Chavez. Had a combined 68 points in her last 3 games, of course, with the Phoenix Mercury. She's out of college now, but that's okay. I'll give Rutgers a shout out at the end. A combined 68 points in her 3 games this week. That included 28 points on Friday over the Chicago Sky in Copper's birthday celebration. So happy birthday, Aaliyah Chavez, our Her of the Week. And shout out to Rutgers for escaping the clutches of the Ohio Bobcats.
Yeah, shout out to Rutgers. Shout out to C. Vivian Stringer.
Yeah, we love C-Viv. We love C-Viv. We have another great coach who's going to start this week, starting 5. That is our 5 biggest storylines in the world of women's basketball. And number 1, Mitch. Okay, so full disclosure. When I was in Indianapolis over the 4th of July weekend with our friend and sometimes co-host of this podcast, Rebecca Kopelman, her dad decided to go in the archives and dig up a bunch of old school Disney, sometimes not Disney sports movies and force us to watch them. One of them was Eddie with Whoopi Goldberg, and I had never seen it before. Neither had Rebecca. We also had to watch Juwanna Mann. Alan Kopelman is clapping right now. He's an avid listener of the pod. Shout out to Alan. And Alan has been begging for me to talk about Eddie or talk about Juwanna Mann. We're going to refrain from that second one, but we are going to talk Eddie because it almost happened in the real world. With one DawnStaley and the New York Knicks. It has been revealed she almost was offered the Knicks job.
I've seen Eddie, but probably not since I was like 9 years old. And I don't remember the plot of that movie whatsoever.
So it's basically Whoopi Goldberg is like this big super fan and everyone's mad at the coach and they're mad at ownership of the Knicks. And so she enters the contest that they were going to let a fan be the coach for the day. And so she wins the contest and the Knicks win for the first time in like weeks. And so people are like, crap, just have her coach. She's great. And I actually talked about this with my leadership program. Shout out to the Daily Coach Academy. We talked about it there because I said, as much as, yes, it's a comedy, it's a very 90s film. So there's a lot of dad jokes and what have you. But from the perspective of she made it a point to connect with each and every player, Rick Fox on down, in that locker room. And it was a primitive form of leadership that we see now across professional and collegiate sports, where this idea of not just a player's coach, but someone who's actually invested in the lives and the trajectory of each player, as opposed to just, here is the playbook, here are the rules. If you don't follow it, you're gone. And so, yeah, it was actually like really like heartwarming because she tried to care about every single player because she was actually a super fan. Not that DawnStaley would have necessarily approached Jalen Brunson and company that way, but now we do have to speculate which evil character from the movie was the real life version of trying to keep DawnStaley down and not get her the next job. Was it Jalen Brunson's dad? Because many are speculating.
I'm going to take one quick side street here again before we move on. So I'm now, because you sent me down this rabbit hole, I'm reading the cast list from Joanna Man.
Yes.
And it includes
Alan Kopelman is so excited, by the way, that you pivoted away from Eddie. And
so
you went to
it
Joanna.
includes the artist formerly known as Genuine, Lil Kim.
Yes.
It also includes Muggsy Bogues, Dikembe Mutombo, Vladi Divac, Rasheed Wallace, current women's basketball coaches Tammy Reese and Arturo Coleman, who I don't think I knew that. Wow, that's wild. Also Cynthia Cooper.
It probably wouldn't have been able to air in 2025.
No, absolutely not. It is incredibly to say it lightly, politically incorrect. Okay, so yeah, DawnStaley and the Knicks. This is back in the news because she went on Candace Parker and Aaliyah Boston's podcast recently to basically explain her interest in the Knicks interest in her. I'm just going to read you her quote. So she told their podcast, which is called Post Moves, quote, "I would have had to do it if she was offered the job. Not just for me, for women, to break that door open. I would have had to do it. It's the New York Knicks. I'm from Philly, but it's the freaking New York Knicks." She went on to say that she thinks that maybe she kind of botched her chances at getting the job because she kind of pressed the Knicks on if they were prepared to essentially hire a woman. So she told Candace and Aaliyah, quote, "How, if you hired me as the first female head coach in the NBA, would it impact your daily job? Because it would. You're going to be asked questions that you don't have to answer if you're a male coach. There's going to be the media and all this other stuff that you have to deal with that you didn't have to deal with and don't have to deal with when you hire a male." That got them thinking, maybe she's right. I felt the energy change after that. So I shot myself in the foot by being inquisitive and asking all those darn questions. End quote. So I find that super, super interesting because it's kind of, it's a little bit, I think, contradictory to what she has said previously when it comes to coaching men and her interest in coaching men. Or maybe perhaps her feelings about this have just changed, or maybe it's the fact that it's the Knicks and not like the Hornets, sorry, Hornets, or somebody like that. Because in previous years, I remember this coming up in the 2023 Final Four because it was when the Temple men's job was open. And she told the assembled media there at that time, "I have no interest in coaching men." And I wrote a column back then at For the Win, kind of likening her a little bit to, Morgan Wooten, who coached for years at DeMatha High School in Washington, D.C., had this great quote. He was actually offered the NC State job, I believe, before Jim Valvano was. And he basically said, your mountains are where you find them, and my mountains are here in high school basketball in D.C. And I thought at the time that it seemed to me like, okay, well, Dawn is committed to staying in women's college basketball. Her mountain is in Columbia, South Carolina. But since then, she has interviewed now for the Trailblazers job and the Knicks job. And I have to think it probably won't be the last time that she interviews for an NBA head coaching job. And maybe perhaps she will actually get one of those jobs. I remember her saying after she interviewed with the Trailblazers, she essentially said, this was on some podcast, it might have been the podcast with Ryan Clark and Fred Taylor and Channing Crowder. Yes. I think it was on this podcast that she basically said she was doing those interviews to help other women, sort of as like a research kind of thing. So she could do those interviews and then take that information and give it to other women who might be interviewing for coaching jobs, and whether it be men's college basketball or the NBA or the G League or whatever. So I find all of this very, very interesting and like something to keep an eye on, because I don't think that Dawn, I think I've said this before on this podcast, I don't think Dawn is a college basketball lifer. Like, I don't think we're going to see her coaching at South Carolina into like her mid 70s, like we've seen with Tara Vanderveer and now Gino Auriemma and some of these other people, or in other sports, your Nick Sabans and your Coach K's and on and on and on. So I do think like there is at some point, maybe in 5 years, maybe within 10 years, another pivot in Dawn's career, another chapter. Now, is that going to be coaching an NBA, or is that going to be, she also talked about with Candace and Aaliyah, getting involved in ownership somehow in the WNBA, because they asked her, would you be interested in coaching the WNBA expansion franchise in Philly? And she basically said, no, I've had chances to coach in the WNBA, and that's not something I really want to do. At South Carolina, I want to make the WNBA better. So I'm trying to feed the WNBA really, really great players and prepare my players for that level. That will in turn make the WNBA better. But she did say she would be interested in owning something, or so I wonder if that is
team
maybe
president, GM,
right,
maybe
something like that. I think I wonder if something like that is on the horizon for Dawn, if it's not coaching in the NBA.
It is certainly something that I could see happening. She's only 55 years old, and I think she's the type of learner. She's the type of learner where she is all about a growth mindset and spreading the goodwill and spreading the good word of women's basketball. And so if that means ownership, if that means going to the NBA, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility for one DawnStaley. Also, I can't believe that we already are 11 minutes into this week's episode and we talked about Joanna Mann. Moving on with this week's starting five to number 2. To the W we go, and oof, size large. Final score Sunday night. The Golden State Valkyries 75, the Indiana Fever 63. If you actually watch this game from start to finish, my goodness, I don't know if your eyes are still in your head. This was as ugly a game as it comes, although of late, a lot of these Fever games have not exactly been the most aesthetically pleasing. Indiana was 6 of 30 for a second straight game, shot about 20% from beyond the arc. The Valkyries, meanwhile, if you're a Valkyries fan, you were loving this one. They shot 63% from three-point range, 12 of 19. 50% from the floor overall. I don't think I ever saw a world, Mitch, in which Ileana Rupert would drop 21 on the Indiana Fever, but she was 5 of 8 from three-point range, and she absolutely cooked Indiana, who, yes, still is in position to make the postseason in that 8 spot, especially after defeating the LA Sparks as part of this West Coast road trip earlier in the week, and that was a nice quality win. Lots of folks were saying, hey, the Fever are 2-0 since the CC22 logo dropped. Not so much the case at the Chase Center on Sunday. The Valkyries, by the way, in 6th place in the WNBA standings, and they could potentially wrap up a playoff spot this week, which for me, Mitch, would go down as one of the bigger sports stories of the calendar year. That's not hyperbole. I don't think you see an expansion team making the postseason in any sport in year one, but especially for them to not even be sneaking into the postseason and being a 7 or an 8 seed, I think that obviously in and of itself is an accomplishment. But what do you make after this result of those final 4 spots in the field? The New York Liberty are 5th in the standings because the Lynx, the Aces, the Dream, and the Mercury have all already clinched. The Valkyries in the 6th spot, Seattle in the 7, although they got thumped by Indiana at Gainbridge Fieldhouse last weekend. And then the Fever 8th with the Sparks hot on their tail, 2 games back. Everyone else, the Mystics, the Sun, the Sky, and the Wings, have been eliminated.
Yeah, I think from this game specifically, my biggest takeaway was Veronica Burton, 13 assists on the night. I looked it up. The Valkyries are now 5-2 on the season when Veronica Burton has double-digit dimes. So shout out to her. She's having a great year. We were going to talk about this later in the starting 5, so we'll just put this at number 3, kind of taking a closer look at the playoff picture. We have now those top 4 teams, like you mentioned, have clinched. So the Lynx are in, and they have also clinched, I believe, home court advantage throughout the postseason as the number 1 seed. So we got the Lynx, we got the Aces, we got the Dream, we got the Mercury, and then the bottom 4 are also all eliminated from the playoffs. So the Mystics, sorry, no dice. The Sun, we knew you'd be here. The Sky, we also knew you'd be here, and the Wings, unfortunately.
But shout out to the Sun because they've won more games in the last 3 weeks than they did the rest of the season.
Yes, the Sun have been fun. They've been the fun bad, and the Mystics too. Though we thought that you might be in contention for the playoffs. So yeah, so now we have basically 5 teams fighting for 4 spots. I think the Liberty are, safe to say they're going to get in there. I find it interesting. Yeah, right now in the standings, the Valks are ahead of the Storm. I'm not sure what the math is here.
Yeah, they're 1 game ahead of them. I don't know why. In the standings, it says that they both are 10 games back of first place. I think, but then maybe
the Storm have played one more game.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And the Sparks are still in the mix with that 18-20 record. So the Sparks, I think, as we kind of expected, have gotten a lot better since they've gotten Cameron Brink. They've kind of had a little late season surge here. I think the Liberty, dealing with their injuries, they've had some ups and downs. The Aces, we've talked about their surge. They still haven't lost since the last time we podcasted. But yeah, I mean, the Valkyries, I just making the playoffs in your first season as an expansion team would be a really big deal, and it would be really, really awesome for that franchise. I just think everything is kind of, going really well for them right now. So we'll see kind of how these last couple weeks shake out with those 5 teams in the mix for 4 spots.
So let's also bring this into the conversation as we combine number 2 and number 3 in this week's starting 5. Here was the players who were available in this game for Indiana. Aaliyah Boston, Natasha Howard, Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hull with her 2 black eyes. Odyssey Sims signed to a rest of the season contract. Damaris Dantas been on the team since day 1. Brianna Turner been on the team since day 1, but really didn't play. KK Timpson was a DMP because Steph White is unpredictable when it comes to the rookie. Then Shea Petty and Ariel Powers, with Petty playing 10 minutes, Powers playing 19 minutes. She dropped 17 in this game. This is as much of a ragtag bunch as I think you're going to see at this juncture of the season. And that's with the New York Liberty having a third of their roster unavailable at different points last week because of injuries. And so that's where I look at it and I say the Fever's final 4 games of the regular season at Phoenix, that's on Tuesday. So by the time you listen to this podcast, we'll already have a result there. Home against the Sky, at Washington, and then home against the Lynx. As for the Sparks, they have a lot more games to go. As we're recording this on Monday, September 1st, they'll play at Seattle tonight. 2 back-to-back games at Atlanta, home against Dallas, at Phoenix, home against the Aces. That's obviously a bit of a difficult road, more games to begin with, let alone the quality of the opponents. And so that's where I think Fever fans have been breathing a sigh of relief of, it's okay, we're going to sneak into the postseason, especially with Seattle being up and down this last 2-week stretch. But at the same time, I mean, it's just so hard to take a proof of concept from year 1 of Stephanie White into year 2, let alone the Caitlin Clark of it all, with people still speculating, is she going to come back here in this next 4-game stretch? Will she come back for the postseason?
Here's my concern with the Fever. I think this game is a big example of it. I kind of wonder if, and maybe this is Stephanie White's fault, or maybe it's her teammates' fault. I just kind of wonder, in the absence of Caitlin Clark, why hasn't Aaliyah Boston been put in a better position to succeed and carry this team? I look at, this game versus the Valkyries. So she plays 30 minutes. Golden State is not a team that has like a super imposing, impressive front line. They're fine in the front court. And the Fever, you have Aaliyah Boston, and we know what Aaliyah Boston is and can be. She took 7 shots, 2 of 7 from the floor, scored 4 points. Why? We should be putting the ball in her hands more often. She should be getting more shots. I just don't really understand, in the absence of Caitlin Clark, if it's a night where Kelsey Mitchell is not cooking, and Kelsey Mitchell 4 of 14 from the floor, 2 of 10 from 3, so not exactly on her Kelsey Mitchell is cooking level. If it's one of those nights, why aren't you just feeding the post and setting things up for Aaliyah Boston and running the offense through her?
Because they can't feed the post. That's the problem, because they've struggled to have a true primary ball handler besides Mitchell after Ari McDonald went down for the season. And so it's more difficult than it looks. I think what's interesting to your point, Mitch, is that Aaliyah Boston did not, and this is with all due respect to the gals at South Carolina, she did not have a point guard with Caitlin Clark's skill set at South Carolina. She was much more, I don't want to say creating her shot type of center at South Carolina, because to be clear, she was more of a back to the basket center. Now, I think if anything, you see more of the pick and roll. You see her certainly bringing the ball up and down the floor. So I think she's found more dimensions to her game in the W, which is a good thing. But I do think that we've now kind of typecasted her, and I do hope that Stephanie White and her staff have not typecasted her, and that they are agile and adaptable enough to say, okay, we don't have Caitlin. Well, now we need Aaliyah to be bringing the ball up and down the floor. We need to make sure we have 1, 2, 3 primary ball handlers, so multiple players on the floor with Aaliyah are capable of feeding her in the low post, as opposed to, all right, well, Kelsey's out here just running around like a whirling dervish and sometimes shooting threes and sometimes feeding Aaliyah. And that's what their offense has largely been the last 2 months.
Yeah, like why? So Odyssey Sims, 1 of 10 from the floor. Aerial Powers, 13 shots. Why are both of those players taking more shots than Aaliyah Boston? I don't get that. But to your
Especially
point,
when you look at Aaliyah Boston's numbers from Friday against the Sparks, or Thursday, whatever night that was. Aaliyah Boston, 22 points, 11 boards, 4 assists, 6 steals, 61.1% from the floor. The first player in W history to have those numbers with 0 free throw attempts. So that's the other thing, is like they're not even feeding her in the low post. But then when she's in the paint, she can't A, get a call worth a lick, and then B, she can't even really bang in the boards in order to get to the free throw line. Like it defies logic. And I know there's a lot of folks listening right now who are saying, well, yeah, it's the WNBA officials and the inconsistencies of what is a foul, what is not. And Aaliyah Boston can't ever get a foul called. And that's what this is. But I do think, to your point, I think a lot of it has to deal with the roster construction and the actual operation too.
Yeah, it's we'll see. A couple games left to figure it out before we get to the postseason.
As we're calling a couple of audibles, let's hit number 4 now in this week's starting 5 to put a bow on our WNBA conversation until we get to what's the beef, of course, because there's always beef in the W. Mitch, the Washington Mystics officially eliminated from the postseason this weekend. That comes on the heels of a very impressive year 1 for rookie Sonia Citron, Kiki Ariafen, and of course a rookie coaching staff. And that's after they shipped Brittany Sykes at the trade deadline out to the West Coast to join the Seattle Storm. I'm fascinated to see what this Mystics team becomes. And I'm already workshopping in my head maybe some free agents they should be adding, body types that they need to surround Citron and Ariafen in this core group. I'm curious your thoughts on where the Mystics go from here, especially knowing that fellow first rounder Georgia Amore is expected to be back in 2026 off the torn ACL.
I think this year the Mystics were kind of playing with house money. Like, I don't think anybody actually expected them to compete for a playoff spot, and they were certainly in the mix there for a while, before they kind of ran out of gas. But I think they were kind of playing with house money this year, in terms of like expectations of wins and losses and being competitive, sort of on that scale. I think they have a really good core now to build around. When you talk about not only Sonia Citron and Kiki Ariafen, but you had Shakira Austin give you a healthy season this year, and show you really like what she can be against some really good teams and in some really like pressure moments. And then like I said, you have those 2 rookies, Sonia and Kiki, who were just awesome. And then you're going to have that third, Georgia Amore, get healthy next year. You're going to have another really high draft pick next year come in. I think the Mystics are headed in the right direction. I think there's reason to be optimistic about their future, even though it didn't happen for them necessarily this year. I also think I think there's good things to say about just like the culture that they have there. Alicia Clark coming in and doing good things, some other players like Sug Sutton, really stepping up under them. I mean, Brittany Sykes was playing awesome before she, apparently requested a trade and got shipped out to Seattle. I'm not sure if she just wanted to be on a contending team or what that was. Stephanie Dolson still doing her thing. So I think things are going good there. Also, another rookie like has shined in spurts for them, Lucy Olson. Shout out to her.
Go Hawks.
I think they have some good things there that are happening for the Mystics.
The way I see the Mystics right now, so again, Iriafen and Citron are your core. The hope is that Georgia Amore becomes your starting point guard. You put her and Citron together, and with all due respect to Niele Ivey, I mean, you're right there in terms of Hidalgo and Citron and Olivia Miles from the 2024 season, minus the drama.
Yeah.
And there you go. I said something nice about Notre Dame. Then Lucy Olson, I think, is your ideal backup point guard because she also could always fill in on the wing for you if you really needed her to, because she's got some length and size. JC Sheldon, who they traded for at the trade deadline, is still on her rookie contract as well that runs through 2027. So, Sheldon, Iriafen, Citron, Amore, and then Lucy Olson are all under contract. Shakira Austin's rookie contract does expire at the end of this year. So she technically would be a free agent. And so very curious in what direction.
She exercised her option.
Oh, she did.
So she's got
at least
one more year. So 2026 is when she will be a RFA.
Okay, so 2026 for Shakira Austin. Obviously, Alicia Clark is a one-year rental. And again, a lot of this has to deal with the CBA. And so kind of why I'm walking through this roster.
Yeah.
Stephanie Dolson is in her age 32 season, still getting it done. But I'm curious, and it's kind of similar to the conversation we had all off season about Aaliyah Boston and who do you pair with her in the front court in Indiana? Who do you pair with Kiki in the front court in Washington? Because she, like Aaliyah, is the type of player where she is not a traditional 5. She's undersized, if that. But you need someone who can be a rim runner, but can still also give you offensive production and isn't just in there to protect the rim.
I think the Mystics will probably now, unless they trip and stumble and fall into the number 1 overall pick in the lottery, and then they can take Lauren Betts. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. I think they'll run it back this next season with Shakira Austin and Kiki as kind of like their front court pairing, because Shakira can be that player that you just described, like great at rim running, can take up space, can protect the rim. She just hasn't been healthy before this season for a full year to really, I think, show all that potential. I keep going back to, when I saw her in person earlier this season, when we saw the Mystics beat the Aces at George Mason. Shakira was awesome in that game. Really big reason why the Mystics won. So I think they probably run it back then, but then it's just about sort of filling in some other gaps around there. I am really curious to see where their pick is in the upcoming draft and how they choose to use it, because like you mentioned, you do have Georgia Amore getting healthy, but you really don't 100% know what you have in her yet in terms of at the WNBA level. So if you get number 2, number 3, somewhere in that ballpark, are you going to take an Olivia Miles or a Flau'jae Johnson and say,
can you say no to that player either if they're there? That's the question. Because if they're the most talented player, with all due respect to Lucy Olson, I mean, you might even be able to get something for her if you traded her as a backup point guard.
And then you just go into camp next year and you say, okay, we have these 2 caliber starting point guards, we think, who are young, and we'll let the cream rise to the top and kind of go from there.
And of course, then people will bring up Georgia Amore's size because they always do. Let's end this week's starting 5, Mitch, on a note from the college ranks and a team that something tells me we're going to be talking about a lot once the calendar flips to November.
Yeah. So this happened earlier last week. Aaliyah Chavez, who we're going to be talking about probably a lot on this podcast going forward, is one of the best freshmen in the country. Was a couple times. I think the rankings have kind of changed and stuff, but she has been tabbed as the number 1 overall recruit for this incoming freshman class. She was the MVP of the Jordan Brand Classic. She was Gatorade's National High School Player of the Year. She basically had her choice of, she could have gone anywhere. She had offers from everywhere and anywhere. She had offers from, let me see, I have a list here. I mean, South Carolina, LSU, UCLA, Texas, all the top
She is
programs.
from Lubbock, Texas, too. It's important to point out. She is from West Texas.
Yes, and almost went to Texas Tech. Texas Tech was in her final 3. She ended up going to Oklahoma. I think that her not going to Texas Tech is probably going to play a factor in that head coach maybe not being around much longer after this season, but we'll get to that on another podcast. Maybe we get to some hot seat stuff. So Aaliyah Chavez landed at Oklahoma under Jenny Baranczyk. So Aaliyah Chavez was at this like pep rally thing of sorts this last week, Oklahoma getting football season kicked off for stuff, incoming freshman class, trying to get the crowd hyped up. So she grabs the microphone and she says, "We went to the Sweet 16 last year, but we going to the Elite 8 this year. I promise that, y'all. And I challenge all of you to be at every single home game, every single one." So, Aaliyah Chavez already promising big things for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think while it's been quite some time since Oklahoma has been to an Elite 8, 2010, there is reason for optimism there. I mean, because you add her to a mix of Reagan Beers, Peyton Verhulst, and Sahara Williams all coming back. Those were Oklahoma's top 3 scorers last year. Sahara Williams coming off a really good summer where she was on Team USA's 3-on-3 squad. We know what Reagan Beers can do. Peyton Verhulst had a career season last year. So, Oklahoma, I think, is trending upwards. And I think that this sort of optimism is warranted. I think that they're going to be a pretty good team this season. I think they're probably going to start the year off ranked inside the top 15 somewhere. It really wouldn't surprise me at all if they're one of the final 8 teams standing in the NCAA tournament.
We have to hit what's the beef, but I think this is a great segue to the main event. Yes, the main event this week, because we're going to debate the blue bloods of women's college basketball as of 2025. And I think it's important to look at that, because when you hear quotes like Chavez's, or when you hear quotes like this one, Mitch Northam, quote, "I dreamed of playing against Alabama. They don't have Nick Saban to save them. I just don't see them stopping me." That quote, of course, is from Florida State quarterback Tommy Castellano. See, I told you there'd be college football in this show. And he made that statement in June. And a lot of people looked around and said, "Tommy, you just got run off from Boston College and Bill O'Brien. You just got to Florida State. You're not in a position to make those sort of statements, especially about one of the greatest coaches of all time. Oh, and by the way, the blue blood in the world of college football." But he made it anyway. And he later said that, number one, he believes it, which I do. Knowing Tommy since he was a freshman at Ware County High School, I believe that he believes that. I know the kid. I know the confidence. And second, he stressed how it was important for him to say that because he wanted to instill confidence in the rest of his team, that he wasn't afraid to make that sort of proclamation. And so I don't know if Elite 8 is quite the same proclamation as we won 2 games last year and we're going to beat Alabama. But right. I do like the confidence, and I do like speaking it into existence, even if it's not. I thought you were going to say that she got on the mic and said, "We're winning the national title." Because hey, I would be here for it. I'd be here for the boldness of it, even if I'm still a little questioning if they actually have all the pieces to win a national title.
There was definitely room for her to take it, a step or even a few steps further. Like she could have said, "We're going to win the SEC," or, we're going to go to the Final Four, or, something like that. But she does, I think. I'm looking forward to seeing her and covering her and talking to her, because it does seem like she has some charisma and some swagger to her. Earlier this summer, she clapped back against whoever the guy is at ESPN who does the high school rankings. Mm-hmm. I think his name is Shane Laughlin, maybe.
Yes.
Because he, dropped her from, number 1 to number 2 or number 3, I can't remember, and then it was either Jazzy Davidson or CN Betts was the new number 1, and she kind of clapped back at him on social media and was like, "You can keep them rankings," or whatever. So I'm here for the trash talking charismatic women's college basketball players. I'm looking forward to that. Oklahoma, oddly enough, plays a non-conference game this year at Western Carolina.
Oh,
so I'm going to be driving to the mountains at some point to see.
Into the mountains Chavez. You go, Mitch.
Yeah,
it's a little trip because there ain't no mountain high enough for Aaliyah Chavez, if you know what I mean.
There you go.
Okay, as mentioned, we got to hit this week's What's the Beef. Mitch had this week's submission. Quite frankly, it kind of like the conversation surrounding MVP, what defines an MVP in professional sports. This one's great because it is a philosophical conversation of, can you allow another team to come into your arena and receive cheers, even if that team has 2 titles and has a multi-time MVP, and you're upset because that national figure is getting love in your home gym? Continue, Mitch.
Yeah, so just to set the table, so this was last Wednesday. The Las Vegas Aces going to Atlanta, and they beat the Dream 81-75. As you might expect, when the Las Vegas Aces, who feature A'ja Wilson, when they go into the city of Atlanta, which happens to be home of the WNBA team that is closest to Columbia, South Carolina, there were a lot of Gamecock fans there, and there were a lot of people cheering for A'ja Wilson, who, by the way, had a game that featured her putting up 34 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 blocks in a decisive win as the Aces continued their late season surge back into sort of, I think, contending status. So during this game, as A'ja Wilson is taking free throws or doing other A'ja Wilson things, the building started chanting MVP chants for A'ja Wilson, deservedly so, I think. After the game, though, Rhyne Howard felt some type of way about this. Basically said it's hard to compete when the home fans aren't on your side. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit. That is from, I'm reading a tweet from our friends at No Cap Space. And then she said, quote, "You want to come see Gamecocks? We have Gamecocks on our roster." And this led to like a lot of, I think, discussion and stuff on Twitter. Someone suggested some sort of thing, like basically the Pistons did when they wouldn't allow Knicks fans into the building during the playoffs. The big difference there is that you're talking about the Knicks and the Pistons and, zip codes and stuff like that. This is the Dream and Gamecocks fans. There's a lot of intersecting in that Venn diagram. And I think doing anything like that where you're going to limit who can buy tickets to your game, that seems like a very slippery slope to, I think for Atlanta, alienated a portion of an already fragile fan base. Right. There's a lot of overlap of Southeasterners who are Dream and Gamecock fans. And a lot of them are always going to have loyalty to A'ja Wilson first. And turning any of those people away, I think, is a bad idea. As someone who, I lived in Atlanta and I covered the Dream as a beat writer in 2018, which before this season was like basically their only good year in the past, 10 years or so. That was Nikki Collins' first year. They went to the conference finals. They had a really good team. That year they played at Georgia Tech. And most nights that building was not full. When A'ja Wilson came in, I believe that was her rookie year or her sophomore year. I can't remember which.
Second year, I think.
She was still being coached by Bill Lambier. I do remember that. Mm-hmm. When she came in, there was a whole lot of garnet and black up in that building. So I just there's a lot of people, I think, that live somewhere between Atlanta and Columbia, who, what is that, 2 or 3 hour radius, who fell in love with women's basketball through South Carolina and DawnStaley and A'ja Wilson. And they maybe got to the WNBA a little bit late because, as I previously mentioned, Atlanta has not really done a great job in like building up this vibrant fan base down there, even though they are really the only WNBA team in the Southeast. And so I think you have a lot of people that were like, we want to keep following and rooting for A'ja. So they latched onto the Aces, but they live in Dream country. And so, they're going to go to Dream games and root for the Dream. But when the Aces come to town, it's all about A'ja, baby.
Because their college team is who they have more of an allegiance to.
Right. And I think in general, that is kind of a thing with pro sports teams, I would say. I mean, not only in Atlanta, but maybe in Charlotte too. Yeah,
I think in the South, it's a very big thing, regardless if it's football or basketball. I
think in the broader Southeast, like you have all these people who went to, ACC and SEC schools, and their loyalty is going to be, for the guys and girls who played for their college teams.
I mean, look at here in Jacksonville. I couldn't begin to tell you, Mitch, how many random people I'll meet in airports in other parts of the country. And as soon as I say, yeah, I cover the Jaguars, they go, Trevor's my guy. I love Travis Etienne because I'm a Clemson alum, and I will follow those two. Even if Travis and Trevor end up on other teams, I will follow those two because those are my guys. And that's an ACC school. But again, it's the Southeast, and it's a part of the country where your affiliation to a college program is perhaps even more important than your fandom to a pro team, regardless of the sport.
And especially in Atlanta. Atlanta is like the SEC capital.
Yes. It is the headquarters. Well, technically, I guess Birmingham, but that's a story for another time.
There's just, Atlanta, Charlotte, these are these transplant cities where, they're just filled of people who graduated from one of these, SEC or ACC schools, and those people carry their allegiances with them. And so, like, I just think it's, the tweet
as
that I sent out.
As an SEC grad, can I share with you
producer Dimitri?
So this is a theory that goes back literally 20-something years to when I graduated from college, and maybe now you can include Charlotte in this, but you graduate from an SEC school, and you have to declare, are you moving to Nashville, Atlanta, or Birmingham? Maybe now you can include Charlotte, but yeah, Atlanta, Nashville, Birmingham, every school is going to be represented in those three places.
Well, it's kind of like, graduating from Ithaca College or anywhere in the central New York area, especially with a communications degree, it was, are you going to New York or Boston? Because you're going to one or the other. It's that simple. So, and to that point though, like when you texted me about this happening, and then Rebecca actually texted me as well, and I brought it up to Kevin, my fiance, and Kevin was just like, oh, okay, tell me this. Like, if, and we'll bring a basketball tournament to it, and then we can certainly look at other sports, because I think in any other sport, this would not fly. But when Megan Gustafson and Kate Martin both were on the Aces last year, hypothetically speaking, Caitlin Clark and the Fever come to town, Las Vegas. Is someone on the Aces going to complain about fans chanting for Caitlin? And I understand Caitlin's a really tough example because that phenomenon stretches beyond fandom with your allegiance to your school and your allegiance to one of the best players in the sport, because it's Caitlin. But the point holds true. Like, you can't be upset that someone else comes into your gym, oh, by the way, beats you, is one of the best players in the sport. People come to see them. In the NBA, when Luka Doncic or LeBron James or Steph Curry come to your town, when LeBron has played in Orlando, people from Jacksonville flock. They have no affiliation to Akron, Ohio. They have no affiliation to the Los Angeles Lakers, but they want to see one of the best players in the sport of all time play on the hardwood. And that's what I think this is. And I don't know. It's growing the game. Like, why are you upset about people being in the arena? I will never understand that.
Right. You should be happy that the arena is full.
Right.
And that you're not playing,
but that's just the reality.
And that you're not playing at half empty Georgia Tech anymore. I also think about, like, just in pro sports in general, when you play in these certain types of markets where you have a lot of the transplants and that sort of thing, like, I see this all the time in Charlotte. Like when the Dallas Cowboys come to Charlotte, that stadium is mostly filled with Dallas Cowboys fans. When the Pittsburgh Steelers come to Charlotte, that stadium is mostly filled with Pittsburgh Steelers fans. And the same thing for the Hornets. When LeBron James steps into the Spectrum Center, that place is filled with Laker jerseys. So, yeah, I just I would advise Rhyne Howard just like a couple of things. Like, number one, you play in a star player-driven league. I think in the WNBA, the NBA is like this too. I think people are always going to have loyalty mostly to star players rather than teams. I think if Caitlin Clark got traded tomorrow to the Valkyries, you would see a lot of the Fever's fan base go to the Valkyries.
Alex fans, amen to that. They would. They totally would.
Also, again, like I said, you play in a city that is the capital of the SEC, and it is in the Gamecocks' footprint, let's call it, like within driving distance from South Carolina. Also, a quick way to turn off your growing but still fragile fan base in Atlanta is to publicly call them out like she did. I would not do that if I were her. That's just me. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's where I'm at with the. I think we should be happy that the arenas are full and that they are chanting something positive for anybody, whether that's a visiting player or a player on the Dream. You know how you get those fans to stop chanting Asia Wilson's name? You stop Asia Wilson, or you beat her, or you block her shot. One of those things. I would try one of those. I would try stopping Asia Wilson. Many have tried and many have failed, but perhaps Carl Smesko and Rhyne Howard can cook something up.
And that's the beef. It is time, folks, for this week's main event, and it's one that we're looking forward to. Who are the Blue Bloods in women's college hoops? Again, promised that we'd have some college football references in the spirit of week 1 of the college football season. We love to talk about those Blue Bloods in college football, men's basketball too, since we are recording this on Monday, September 1st, and North Carolina football plays tonight in front of a sold-out Kenan Stadium. So, interesting. Speaking of Blue Bloods, or maybe not. So, Mitch, let's get right to it. UConn, we're just going to put them off to the side. UConn is obviously a Blue Blood of the sport. South Carolina, and this is where kind of the conversation begins to maybe split. Is South Carolina a Blue Blood, or can I introduce a new term to the lexicon, a new blood? Because that is the term on the men's basketball side as an AP voter that we use quite often with regards to Gonzaga. Villanova's in an interesting kind of gray area, given that they did have success in the 1980s, but then obviously have had a resurgence in the 2000s under Jay Wright. You look at, in that case, when the new blood term really started, that was back in the late 2010s. And so that was when Leonard Hamilton and Florida State were starting to put things together and were they considered a new blood. And so we could go on down the line of that gray area. For you, though, South Carolina, given that they did not win a national title until 2017, given that it wasn't until DawnStaley arrived, which was still within the last 15 years, 20 years, do you view them as a blue blood of the sport?
Yes, I do now.
Okay.
I think that because they have multiple national titles, because since, if you look at like a 10-year span since 2015, they've been to 7 Final Fours. I think you can make the case that since they won their first national title in 2017, no other program in the country has been as successful as them. From 2020 through 2024, they went 167-9, the best winning percentage in the country over that stretch. So I think it took Dawn a little while to build it up, and now that she has, it has been sustained, and they are one of the sport's Death Stars. So I wrote about Blue Bloods over at SB Nation last week just to kind of do some fun evergreen offseason content. So I came up with 7 schools.
Okay.
So
let's hit the 7 then. As opposed to me just throwing out names, let's do the 7.
How about I'll read you my list and let me know if you think there's
Or can I try to hit your 7? I haven't read the article yet. Can I try to hit the 7?
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you can guess. Let's go.
Okay, so UConn, South Carolina.
And South Carolina, you got 2.
Okay, so for the next 5. Notre Dame?
Yes.
Okay. Baylor?
Yes.
Okay. 2 for 2. The pressure is on. USC?
No.
Okay. LSU?
No.
Did you put Iowa in?
No.
Okay, interesting. All right, give us the other 3 then, Mitch.
Okay, so we have UConn, South Carolina, Baylor, Tennessee.
Tennessee, duh. Yep.
Stanford.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame, you mentioned.
Yep.
And the final school is Maryland.
Oh.
Okay, so I
you did say C. Viv Stringer off the top of today's show, so I do want to note that I was gonna go with another very heralded Big Ten program in Rutgers. Obviously the Big Ten's premier program. I'm saying that in jest, folks. With all due respect to Rutgers, who I think they'll be competitive. But point being, yes, Maryland, more known for its time in the ACC. Although to that end, Brenda Freese has certainly had success, even if it hasn't been national titles here in the 2020s.
Yeah. So I think, for men's basketball, like you mentioned, we kind of have a decent idea in our mind of who the Blue Bloods are. And I think in women's basketball, like it's like UConn and Tennessee and Stanford, and then you're trying to kind of figure out who else is in that group. So I came up with a very unscientific and completely arbitrary set of rules to find out who the Blue Bloods were. So my criteria were that the team to be considered, you needed to have at least one NCAA national championship. So that cut out Duke, Iowa, NC State, Louisville, teams like that. I also stipulated the teams needed to be in the top 30 in all-time winning percentage. South Carolina, for what it's worth, just made the cut here. They are 30th. Because of those pre-DawnStaley years, they were a little bit rough. But also not making the cut were former national champions Texas Tech, Purdue, and Texas A&M. Then I wanted to make sure we were valuing kind of success in the modern era, and in sort of a like, what have you done for me lately kind of way? Because like when we talk about the Blue Bloods on the men's side, and someone brings up Indiana, I'm just kind of like, okay, let's.
I was going to say Louisiana Tech on the women's side, but yeah, you could go, or Old Dominion, but you can go there.
Well, we'll get to both of those. So, okay. Yeah, so the couple of ways I figured that out was if a team has missed 5 consecutive NCAA tournaments, obviously excluding the COVID year of 2020, within the last 15 years, they are not a blue blood. So farewell to former multiple-time national champs, Old Dominion, Louisiana Tech, and USC. So that's what did USC in. But I do think I'll get to my other criteria in a second. For USC and some of these other teams, there's a way back into the conversation, right? Like USC goes out and wins the national title this year. Okay, well now they have 3, and it's kind of hard to argue with that. My other criteria was for that kind of success in the modern era. In the last 15 years, if a team went 5 consecutive seasons without finishing the year ranked in the AP Top 25 poll, they are not a blue blood. So that got rid of North Carolina, LSU, and Texas. Because those pre-Kim Mulkey years, like that era, basically the 2010s, where you're like post-Simone Augustus, but pre-Kim Mulkey still, not great for LSU. I do think that they are in progress of working their way back into blue blood status, though. Obviously, they have their national title now. Went to all those Final Fours in the 2000s. The last bit of criteria that I had was to retain blue blood status. A team has had to have been to multiple Final Fours within the past 15 years, or won at least one of its national titles within the past 20 years. And my note on that was, you're safe for now, Tennessee and Maryland, but the clock is ticking.
Kelly Kim, I hope you heard that,
because got to get to a Final Four.
They're coming for you, which we did predict on this podcast, both of us, in our way too early Final Fours, that both of those squads, and that was granted prior to the Gracie Merkel untransfer back to Penn State, that we both are confident that Tennessee and or Maryland could both get to that Final Four. I like your list, Mitch. I'm biased, but ultimately Iowa is such an interesting one because for many newcomers to the women's basketball space, they think, oh, well, it's Iowa. Of course, they've been one of the better teams the last 5 years, and you can even go past Caitlin Clark's tenure to when Megan Gustafson was there. I, of course, was there the last 2 years that they went to the WNIT in 2016 and 2017. They made the tournament in 2018. In 15, they went to the Sweet 16 with Sam Logic and Bethany Doolittle. For me, the reason that I might introduce them into the conversation, but to that point, then you'd want to include Purdue, who did win the 1999 national title, and Iowa's never won a national title, from the perspective of, again, paying homage to C. Vivian Stringer and what she did in the 80s at Iowa, the early 90s, filling Carver Hawkeye Arena, what Dr. Christine Grant did as the women's athletic director at Iowa, because, of course, back then they had 2, and then she became the overall athletic director. But again, I'm biased, so that's why I would have included them. But a point being, like, you have to win a national title to be considered for this, and there's obviously a ton of great talent to pick from. And Aaliyah Chavez is Oklahoma, a new blood, perhaps. And maybe that's the conversation too. It's the new bloods.
Yeah, I think Iowa, and you could probably put NC State into this category as well because of the history with K.Al. And now they've been to another Final Four with Westmore, among the best programs that have never won a national title. Yep. I think everybody kind of in that group that I mentioned, Duke has a bunch of Final Fours to its name. Louisville now, 15 plus years of sustained success under Jeff Walls. There's definitely a path forward. I think like eye test wise for me, if I just kind of tossed my criteria that I made up out the window, I think USC and LSU are the two that seem the most blue bloody to me that aren't in my club.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to deal with who's got banners and who doesn't, but also the talent you've put into the WNBA, the coaches that you've had. I liked this from our friend Joe Ovius, and not to get off topic before we get to making money with Mitch, but with regards to, since we have some folks in the triangle listening, with regards to Hubert Davis and his standing at the University of North Carolina, Joe said on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, if you're North Carolina and you believe you are a blue blood, then that should mean you have a top 5 coach in the sport right now. And do North Carolina men's basketball fans feel like they have a top 5 coach right now? To the point, those 7 teams we just listed on the women's side, Baylor notwithstanding, because I'm going to give them a little bit of grace given they're still in the post-Kim Mulkey era. But I would argue, certainly UConn and South Carolina have top 5 coaches in the game. I know this is unfair because there's 7 schools that we listed. Maryland, I don't know if Brenda's top 5, but I think she's top 10. Easy.
Yeah, I think if you're Maryland, you're very happy to still have Brenda Freeze around.
Killa Kim Caldwell is approaching, I would say, the top 15, top 10, if she's not there already. Then we've got Stanford, again, Grace, post Tara Vanderveer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to question you. And then we had, remind me again, our other 2.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Well, I'd like to believe Niele is a top 5 coach. I'd like to believe Niele's a top 5 recruiter. This year's going to tell me a lot. And then our final school was
let's UConn, Tennessee, Stanford, South Carolina, Notre Dame, Maryland, Baylor.
Baylor, I said I give them some praise.
Yeah,
I think. But to the point, I like Joe's point of like, if you're a blue blood, then you shouldn't be satisfied unless you have a top 5 coach in your purview in the sport. And I think of those 7 schools you listed outside of the 2 that are in the post-legend era, I think that you could make the argument that they feel they have a top 5, top 10, top 15 coach in the sport.
Yeah, I think Baylor fans probably feel pretty good about Nikki Collin. She is 102-36 since taking over for Kim Mulkey, which is a 73% winning percentage. They've been to the NCAA tournament, in consecutive years, and she's got things rolling. I think they feel okay about, her right now. I would say of the programs that I just mentioned, I think the program whose fan base is maybe feeling the most shaky about their head coach might be our friends in South Bend.
Not Stanford.
I think the Stanford fans are willing to give Kate pay. It has only been 1 year. Last year was not great. They do have some recruits coming in. I think this is going to be a really, really interesting year for Notre Dame, just in terms of how are they going to manage with the roster that they have? I think we're really about to find out how good of a coach Niele Ivey is. Yes. We're also going to find out if Hannah Hidalgo has that Russell Westbrook ability in her to just do it all. And we're going to find out how patient everybody in South Bend is, because I'm not optimistic about how things are going to go for the Fighting Irish this season.
That is this week's main event. If you have a thought on this, please comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, because I know we definitely ruffled some feathers with this week's main event. And who are the blue bloods of women's college basketball? It's time to make some money with Mitch. After an incredible 3-0 week, a little bit back down to earth this week, Mitch. I actually had to modify your stats as we've been recording because, yes, unfortunately, final score, the Atlanta Dream win 93-76. You had picked the Sun to cover an 8.5-point spread. So that's an 0-for-3 week with Mitch, but that's all right. That's why we have a new set of picks this week. Take it away, Mitch. Who's number 1?
Yeah, trying to rebound after a not great week. We're going to Thursday. Lynx at Aces, 10 p.m. Eastern on Amazon Prime. The Aces are 2.5-point home dogs, and I'm going to take the home dogs to cover 2.5 points. I don't know. I just think the Aces are just on a roll and don't seem to be slowing down. And I think maybe, just maybe, Asia Wilson might be looking to make a little statement about the MVP race in this game.
But you have the Lynx, or you have the Aces, covering. Sorry,
I have the Aces to cover 2.5, yes.
Here's my thing, though, is the Aces have not played a game when they play on Thursday. They will have not played a game in 8 days. And so I think that the bettors in the desert are accounting for the rust. Now, granted, the last game that they played was against another playoff team in the Atlanta Dream, and that was, of course, a resounding 6-point victory on the road. This is back at home. I think it's more about the layoff in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe that is the reason why the Aces are home dogs, but I like them. I like them here.
And at number 2 in this week's 3-pack.
This is Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern on Ion. The Liberty are at the Storm. The Liberty are road underdogs at 1.5 points, and I'm going to take the Liberty to cover 1.5 and make this very, very close or even win. I like the Liberty to kind of get back on track here before playoffs start against a good team in the Storm, but against a team I think that they know that they are superior to.
Yeah, I'm guessing that part of that has to deal with just the injuries that the Liberty have battled even after Brianna Stewart's return. Sabrina Ionescu has been missing time with a toe injury. Natasha Cloud has missed time with the nose injury. Jonquel Jones missed last week's win over Washington because she was sick. Niara Sabali, has missed time. And so I just think it's because their roster's so banged up, if I had to guess.
Yeah. Number 3 here. This is Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV. Indiana Fever at the Washington Mystics. The Fever are road favorites at 3.5 points. I'm going to take the Fever to build some momentum before the playoffs start against a team that doesn't really have anything to play for anymore.
Yeah, just burying the Indiana Fever, and I don't know, let's try to manifest it, Mitch. Maybe Caitlin Clark's return, 3:00 on the first NFL Sunday of the calendar year. I'm trying to manifest here. I don't think she's going to be back, folks. Don't take that to the bank. But if it was to happen, I'm curious what the ratings would be. As is, I don't think she's going to be back just because Stephanie White has said that she would need 2 weeks of a ramp-up period. If that starts tomorrow, I don't think she will be ready by Sunday. But again, once again, I ask you, Kathy, WNBA scheduling. I get you have to play on NFL Sundays when this part of the calendar hits, but let's be smart about it.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Ooh.
I don't think Caitlin Clark plays anymore this season.
You think it's done?
I think she's done. Yeah.
Okay.
I just feel like we're real close to the end of the season here. The Fever are, even outside of her, injured, kind of banged up, kind of a mess. You talk about Sophie Cunningham, the whole thing. I just don't know what the risk is because I don't think they can win a title this year. So yeah. I don't know.
I am trying to find the quotes from Lexi Hull. She was asked about Caitlin and about the rehab, and she stressed how mature that Caitlin's been through all this while still providing levity to the team, still being the jokester that she always is. She's obviously been on most of, if not all of the road trips, minus the one where she had her boyfriend's grandmother's funeral. And so it's tough because even if, let's say they stay in the 8 seed or they are the 7 seed, and then they got to go face the Dream, who were a thorn in their side in the first half of the season when Caitlin was available, the Aces aren't locked into the 2, but let's say it is the Dream. Either way, point being, both the Aces and the Dream mismatches for the Indiana Fever. So you rush Caitlin back to play in a 3-game series that results in what? You get swept?
And if you put Caitlin out there, you know the type of player Caitlin is. She's going to go balls to the wall, 110%. I just don't think it's, as an organizational decision, it is probably not the best idea to force your generational talent to maybe perhaps come back from an injury when she's not quite 100% ready to compete in a playoffs in a year where I don't think that you think you can win a title.
Clip it, lock it. Mitch says she's done. To recap Mitch's picks this week and making money with Mitch, he has the Las Vegas Aces, a lot of underdogs this week, 2.5-point home dogs against the Minnesota Lynx on Thursday. Friday night, he has the New York Liberty as a 1.5-point underdog at the Seattle Storm. And finally, the matinee on Sunday, the Indiana Fever, 3.5-point favorites, even without Caitlin Clark, potentially, of course, at the Washington Mystics. It is time for last call, Mitch. Shout outs, closeouts, plugs, anything that we may have missed. I mentioned Jonquel Jones out with injury earlier this week, and obviously the New York Liberty have been ravaged by injuries. This stat from ESPNW I thought was pretty wild. The New York Liberty are 33-0 since Jonquel Jones, joined the team when she has a double-double in the regular season. They are 33-0, which is as much of instant money, making money with Mitch that you possibly could have. So just file that one away, folks. If you see JJ having a big game, odds are good. The Liberty are going to hold on, and hopefully now that that stat has been revealed, it doesn't change because it's a lot of fun. I want to give a shout out, as much as I bashed the Fever and their performance against the Golden State Valkyries on Sunday, to the holdback woman of the year, Aaliyah Boston. Speaking of Caitlin Clark, despite the fact that she has not played in over a month and a half, she is still fighting with the officials, and she is still walking onto the floor as if she is a head coach. And she did that Sunday at the Chase Center, and Aaliyah Boston, double-handed, had to pull Caitlin Clark, whip her back so that she would not get ejected because she was trying to mouth off to the refs. And so shout out to Aaliyah, shout out to Caitlin, though, because then she met with Ari McDonald's AAU team after the game and made the kids smile, and Ari's so happy. So, you know, when Ari McDonald's happy, it makes me happy, just like Aaliyah Boston. They both love friendship.
Indeed. Yeah, I like to see them happy.
All right, what else you got for us, Mitch? What's cooking at SB Nation this week?
I don't have any shout outs right now. I will have things published at sbnation.com at Breakaway later this week. I'm going to do a mailbag of sorts. Some folks asked me some questions on social media, so I'm going to try and answer those. Going to try and take a look at some non-conference schedule. Also writing about some volleyball here recently. The volleyball season has started, so yeah, lots of fun stuff happening.
Volleyball season has begun. September is here. When you're listening to this podcast, the announcement will have already hit. A new place to follow my Jaguars content. You can subscribe to the Mo Bryan Notebook on Patreon. Would love for you to join in the fun. We're going to have conversations about the Jacksonville Jaguars specifically, but the NFL at large as well. And yes, Club 904 will also, knock on wood, have also debuted syndicated on the Action Sports Jacks network, but live on YouTube Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Sunday nights as well. We're again focused on the Jaguars, bigger NFL picture. So if you're one of those crossover fans of the pod because you love women's basketball and you love the NFL, go subscribe, go watch, and of course, like and subscribe here, the Women's Basketball Podcast and OG Triangle Media. He's Mitch, I'm Mia, saying we will catch you next week.
Deuces.